This podcast is sponsored by Path to Publishing, helping authors to take control over their publishing journey for over 21 years. Visit pathtopublishing.com to get on the path to publishing your next book.
Welcome, everybody, to It's Truly Novel, where we talk about all things new on the internet. I am your hostess, Brandy M. Miller, and with me today I have Karen E. Osborne, an author who has got some new releases coming out in June. We are so excited to have you, Karen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm so excited that your new venture. This is very cool. I'm glad to be part of your new venture, something novel.
Absolutely. I like new things. I like to explore what's going on around me and see what everybody's got going on. Call me nosy. All right. So you have Reckonings that launches June 16th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about Reckonings.
Well, first, I'll show you Reckonings.
Ooh. All right.
That's my author copy.
I like the cover.
Thank
Pretty
you.
nice. So what have we got going on there with Reckonings?
So Roxy is a hot mess. She is 36 years old. She has 4 children. Her teenage daughter is pregnant. She has 2 rescue dogs, her husband, and they live in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment with their dogs and the children and everything. And she and her husband work for a very domineering person, her husband's father. And she just wants to get her family out from under. She wants to find a house. That's her driving force. And she has come up with this crazy solution. She has written a play, and she has convinced the community theater to put it on. And she's convinced a childhood friend who's an actor to star in it. And she thinks somehow in this little tiny town that she lives in, on this like off Broadway venue, that somehow she will make enough money as a writer to get them out of their crummy job and into a house. And that's where the story opens. That's all of her hopes. However, Roxy has a secret. She had been raped, and she doesn't know if Jewel is the child of the rape or her husband. She's never, ever told anyone. And her rapist just returned to town. And he's not only back, but he's wealthy, and he's promising the town revitalization, and he's promised the town, he's going to save the theater, and he's going to do everything. And he wants to see his daughter. And poor Roxy. So this takes place in 9 days in August, as the play is, and the play, to help everything else, is autobiographical, and it's about the rape that she hasn't told her husband, that she hasn't told her daughter. So she's in a lot of trouble. So it's a page-turning 9-day, how is Roxy going to get through this and out of this while the evil spider
All right.
is stalking her?
Why did you choose the rape, as the driving force behind your novel?
1 out of 4 women in this country are molested. 1 out of 4. Isn't that like a staggering?
Actually, that was the statistic when I was 9 years old. I am 46. I would bet you money that statistic is closer to 1 out of 2.
Really? Wow. I'm going to have to double check that. I just recently heard the 1 out of 4.
Yeah, the 1 out of 4 was in place when I was 9.
Yeah. And why would you know that?
Because I was molested.
Yeah.
By my stepfather.
Me too. Not by your stepfather.
Well, no, it wasn't a shared
trauma.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that this is a very common situation for women
really
to
is.
face.
It's a terrible thing.
It's unfortunate. I think it probably, they said at the time that 1 out of 6 boys were molested, but I would bet you money that is actually a much higher rate, because boys don't typically talk about it. They aren't
They
encouraged to
don't.
talk about it. And if they
Yes.
are talking about it, it's usually like people are like, way to go, high five. It's
Mm,
like, that's such a sad attitude to me.
it is. So because of that, and because as you are, I am incest survivor and a rape survivor. I do write about women who've gone through that trauma without the trauma being the focus of the story.
Mhm.
So it's so the story isn't about the rape. The story is about all of the layers of things, that repercussions that happen in our lives going forward. And
Mhm.
so unlike me, I'm a thriver. I have healed and I am a thriver. Roxy is still a survivor. And in some ways, she's still a victim. And as she tries to navigate her life, do what's best for her children, love her husband, chase her dream, all of that, she figures out that secrets and lies come crashing in on you.
Yeah,
They
they
come
do.
around to
They
bite
do.
you.
They do. Yeah.
And trust, so there's issues of trust, there's issues of healing, but all of it is in a suspenseful, page turning way, because Spider is looming, 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 looming.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine.
And he's tall and good looking and wealthy.
Well, that is an interesting thing that you've done with the villain, because, most people imagine, oh, it's a child predator. They must be horrible looking. People must hate them. But that's not true at all. They're usually
No.
incredibly charismatic people. That's
Yes.
how they keep things going for so long and that's why people don't believe even when the victim tends to speak out. Um,
Yes.
it
My
actually took
dad,
me reporting twice
yeah.
before my stepfather was stopped.
But good for you that at 9 years old, you had the courage and the gumption. I didn't tell anybody.
Mhm.
And my father was a pillar of the community. I mean, he was the most educated person we knew, handsome, loving husband, and here he was a pedophile,
Yeah.
his own children. So I think it does take, and I remember the first time I was raped as a young person, as a teenager, it was date rape. And I didn't know I was raped. I'd never heard the term date rape. I knew something horrible happened to me, but I didn't have a name for it, and I was of course, blaming myself. I shouldn't have had that extra can of beer. I shouldn't have. And Roxy goes through a lot of that. She feels like
Mhm.
she brought this on herself, because she shouldn't have been with him and she shouldn't have had a drink. And her friend, Dallas, her best friend, says, "You said no. Didn't you say no? So what are you talking about?" But all that, yeah.
Well, that's part of the problem with having been molested or even raped. It's your boundaries have been trampled on, and the person who did what they did to you often turns it on you and tells you that it's your fault. And because your boundaries are already a little fuzzy, it's easy to buy the belief that it's you.
Exactly. You buy into that story. And the younger
Mhm.
you are, it's easiest to,
Yeah, it
buy
was.
into it. This is an adult. This is a grown person,
Mhm.
telling me. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry that we've had that shared experience,
Well,
but
I am too, but I'm equally glad that I understand the experience, because in having gone through it, and I also tend to write about women who have had that experience.
mm,
And the first book that I published that was fiction is called The End of Purgatory, and it's about a young woman who's been through experiences and, in fact, is just fleeing a basically an abusive relationship where
mm,
she's caught between that. It's the reason, it's partly part of the reason it's called the end of purgatory is like there's a purgatory when you're caught in that relationship, when you know you should leave, but you're addicted to the person that you're with.
Yeah, for whatever reasons.
Mhm.
Yes.
And so she's been in this off and on relationship for 6 years and finally is just like, enough is enough. This is crazy. But he's not done. Just because she's done doesn't mean he's done.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and that I wanted to kind of highlight the fact that once that relationship is over for her, that doesn't mean it's over for him, and the dangers of that can come up when a man is not in control of himself, when he's being driven by his emotions, not his logic and ration and reason. And of course, he's been traumatized too, but that's not an excuse for
It
abuse.
isn't. No, it isn't. That's why we as women are, as thrivers, are able to stop we didn't pass it on. We didn't harm other people. It annoys the heck out of me how they mostly portray bad guys. And they say, well, the reason that he's so evil is because he had been molested himself as a child. No, most of us don't pass it on. We're not, most of us are just trying to survive. Most of us are just trying to heal. And it would just make me so angry that's the reason someone has turned evil. It is true that most molesters have been molested, but it's not true that most people who've been molested become molesters.
Right. And it is ultimately a choice in how you deal with your trauma. Like you can become somebody who passes on trauma to trauma, and ends up causing more of it. Or you can choose to heal. You can choose to take a look at that thing that happened to you and say, you know what? I don't want to be that person.
Yeah. Do the work.
Yeah.
Very
And it
scary
is hard work. Yes, it is.
And it's frightening.
It's ongoing work. I'm not going to say that I'm done, because I think that's almost a misnomer. These ripple effects that the abuse has, that the impact of it has, go throughout your life. Like I'm constantly finding areas of my life that I didn't realize were being impacted by those things that happened, even though they happened so early. And I have to sort of reassemble that part of myself and put the glue in place.
Yeah.
But so Reckonings is kind of about that, her confrontation with all the secrets and all the lies that go into covering up what we don't want to deal with.
What we don't want to deal with, and somebody else's bad behavior, but making it me be more about my own. So yeah, and her husband, how he reacts is very powerful. He's a great character. All my characters are flawed human beings, because those are the ones
good
who are
news.
interesting.
Yeah,
yes.
Those are real characters. See, I feel if you don't have flaws in your character, what you're doing is a caricature, not an actual character, because all human beings have both good and evil lurking inside, and it's up to us to decide which we're going to feed, so to speak.
Yes, and even my bad guy, Spider, he has a lot of good qualities. It's not all fake. He's not all pretending. He does good works, but he is also this other person. And I've done that throughout, like in Tangled Lies, my second novel, which is a murder mystery. You're the guy who's portrayed as the bad guy for most of it. He's got lots of good qualities. He's got lots of people who count on him and are grateful to him, and so the victim again can think, is this, am I missing something? Because everyone else likes him. Everyone else thinks he's a good person. So
Well, I
Yeah.
think that's the challenge of dealing with somebody. And a lot of this goes back to mental health issues. But when you're dealing with somebody who has severe psychoses, they do have that tendency to have one face that they will present to everybody. And then when you get, the closer you get to them, the more of that brokenness you see of them, the more it cuts you. Like, it's that person that you get close to is nothing like the person they present in society. In fact, I think that's one of the hallmarks of a dysfunctional family is how much they focus on appearance. Like, everything is appearance driven. They want everything to appear like it's all hunky-dory, everything's good. You smile the minute you walk out the door, even though you just spent 15 minutes screaming like a harpy at somebody, right? So, you know, and I think that it's the vulnerability and the authenticity of that are signs of a healthy, healing person.
Yes. And so when we write characters, I write mostly from the point of view of women. And I write only from the point of view of women, although I have good guy, lots of male characters. And as the women grow and change, the arc of that life that we see, all my stories take place in about a week, 10 days, because that just has the crucible, it lets things happen in a short time. It keeps the pages going. But as they change, the realization comes to them about how much strength they have, how much power they have, that they have things, reserves that they can tap into. And then I believe so much in the power of forgiveness.
Oh, yes.
And that you have to start first by forgiving yourself.
Yeah.
And then and forgiveness isn't absolution. It's not telling your rapist, your stepfather that it was wrong. I mean, that it was all right.
No.
You're still saying it's wrong, but I'm not carrying this grief around anymore. I am not carrying all of this anger and hurt, and because it's hurting me, not forgiving. So I write a lot about forgiveness and redemption. Those are secrets and lies, and forgiveness and redemption are pretty much themes in all three of my books.
That's me too. That's the cornerstone of most of my content, is because I came across the power of forgiveness. It was Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, actually, that kind of helped me to understand the danger of refusing to forgive. Is that when you refuse to forgive, you'll not only take the risk of becoming the monster you're pursuing, right? But maybe something worse. Like you do a bigger thing than they did because you're so blinded by your pain that you can't even see what you're doing to other people around you.
Or you do terrible harm to yourself. That you, all the things that can happen with all that toxic energy in you. So you could hurt your physical health, your mental health, your relationships.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the relationships. It's impossible.
Lack of forgiveness is a bad thing. So, but it wasn't easy. I remember the first time my therapist said to me, she said, now, can we talk about forgiveness? No. We're not talking about forgiveness, because I was still so angry. But of course, getting there was the best thing that could have happened to me.
Yeah. Well, I think that what is commonly misunderstood, as you said, is that forgiveness and absolution are the same thing. That it's excusing what happened or saying it was okay. No, it's not okay. It's never going to be okay. What they did was completely and totally wrong. What it is, I liken it more to this, that we're born on this battlefield where everybody's pitching rocks at one another, right? And there are usually 3 responses to getting hit with one of those rocks. Like, you can pile up the rocks and build a wall around your heart that eventually blocks you from getting any love in, right? You can't send it out, and you definitely aren't getting it in, and you're dying on the inside. but you're too afraid to step out and be seen because you're afraid of getting hurt again. So that's option A. Option B, you take the rock and you're like, well, it hurt me. I don't want it to hurt anybody else. So I'm going to put it in this backpack that I'm carrying around. Well, eventually you get so burdened by all of that garbage that you're carrying around that you literally can't move. And so you're getting hurt way more often than you ever would have before.
Absolutely.
You're just never getting rid of that. And then the third reaction, which is where the abuser comes in, is that you pitch rocks back in the direction of the rock that hurt you. Problem is that person's moved on. You end up hitting somebody who's innocent.
Yeah.
And hurting them instead. And the best way is the way of forgiveness, which is you take the rock that was thrown your direction, you set it on the ground, you crack it open, and you look for the gem that's inside of it. And you keep the gem and you throw away the garbage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that way you're profiting from what was done to harm you. You are benefiting from it, and you can pass that gem on to other people.
To other people. Absolutely.
And share the light of it. So you don't have to stay stuck on the battlefield. You don't have to stay behind the wall, and you don't have to be the one pitching things at everybody else.
Exactly right.
So,
exactly right.
Yeah. So I didn't mean to get all into the deep territory, but I'm also not afraid to go there. I'm always kind of excited, actually, about people's perspective and why they write what they write. Now, I noticed that you have written standalone novels. Is there a reason that you chose to write them standalone?
Well, I would be so much more successful, I think, if I wrote a series, because that seems to be the way that, especially in the suspense world. But I follow the characters that talk to me. And when their story is finished, it's finished. So I loved the young women that I wrote about in Getting It Right. Kara and Alex, who didn't know each other. They had no idea that they existed. They were half sisters. And the father on his deathbed asks the daughter that he raised in privilege to go and find the child he had abandoned. And because he wanted to make it right before he died. And so as that story comes to an end, and you don't know, it's not all tied in a bow, I still think about them. I hope that they both have found happiness, and that the world, but then I was done with them because another character started talking to me. So Vera and Danny were in my head, and Vera comes home, and this is in Tangled Lies, and she finds her adult son murdered. And the police are not pursuing it in what she feels is in a diligent way. And 3 months after the murder, she's in a car accident, and Danny, who's 25 and homeless and a liar, and one of those liars who can't not lie.
Pathological liar.
Yes. She lies about things that there's no reason. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't help her in any way. But she's basically a good person, and she sees the car accident, and it looks staged to her. It didn't look right to her. And so she finds Vera, and the two of them spend this week or so solving the murder of Vera's husband, but meanwhile, fixing each other, helping with healing and fixing each other. And then Reckonings, Roxy's story, I couldn't go back to Kara, and I couldn't go back to Vera because Roxy was already in my head and she was already talking to me. So I had to listen to her, and my characters take me places I don't expect. But lots and lots of readers have asked me, well, why don't you write another mystery? And Vera and Danny are going to go solve another murder mystery. And I said, maybe, but I'm already on book 4 that I'm writing now, and I have book 5 in my head. So I don't know exactly when I do that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's when, if your characters demand a reunion, then you'll write that story. You know, if they demand a get together and a party, you'll write that story.
Maybe so.
And maybe there'll be an intersection point, but at the moment there's not. And I can understand that. The End of Purgatory does not have what most people would consider a clean ending. It's more of an ending where she recognizes that she's not ready for love. That she's got some work to do on
She's
herself.
got some more work to do. That's where Getting It Right ends. We know that Kara's got a lot of work left to do, and we're hoping that things work out with her and her young man who likes her, and we hope that things work out with her and her sister, her half sister. But it's only a week. The story takes place in a week, and you can't heal in a week.
No, it would take way more of a miracle. I as a person who's gone through it, I would find that hard to believe.
Exactly.
Hard to
It would be a very inauthentic.
Almost minimizing the work that it requires to heal.
Yes.
Because
exactly right.
You can recognize your need for healing in a week. That could certainly happen.
And she does.
You can
and she'd been working on it. And she'd been working on it prior to the story's start. She had been working on it. But by the end of the 1 week in March, on the cusp of spring, she's not there yet. But there's a lot of hope. I ask, when people say to me, they say, well, what do you think happened? I said, well, what do you think happened? How do you think Kara and Alex are doing right now? Because I pray for them. I hope they're doing all right.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I don't think it's necessary. I know the cliche is to have the happily ever after by the end of the book, but I think that in this modern era, we can take that time. We can take that step back and say, you know what? Maybe the happily ever after is getting to the place where you recognize that you need healing and you become happily
better.
Right, exactly. And that you decide that happiness begins with me. Like, if I'm not happy, it doesn't matter how much everybody else is doing. It's not going to make me happy.
Yeah. And, love, you have to love yourself first. You have to forgive yourself first, so I think that all is important. Although I've been wanting to trying a romance novel, because happy ever after always happens in a romance novel. So maybe number 7 down the road.
Romance is tricky though, because it's not important. It's not enough for readers to fall in love with each character, right? They have to fall in love with the heroine. They have to fall in love with the heroine's partner, but they also have to fall in love with the chemistry between the heroine and her partner.
Yes.
And if you fail to deliver any one of those 3, you will fail to have a successful romance.
Yeah. I don't think any writing is easy. I don't think there's any genre that's easy. I have a friend who writes monologues, and they're just short little one-person plays. And when you watch it or listen to her read it, it seems effortless. It's short, but of course, writing something that short, and you're connected, and you care about the character, and you care about what's going to happen, and so few words. Writing is, it takes work. And
the rough draft is easy for me. It's the editing that's the part that's a challenge. And I'm getting better at it the more often that I do it. But it is still a challenge to go back in. I'm working on one right now where, beta reader feedback came in, and there were flaws that needed to be fixed, but they would change and shift the direction the characters went. And so it's like writing a whole new novel almost.
Or not listening to them and following your
no, they had some valid critiques that
you agreed with.
The plot hole needed to be plugged in order to make sure that the narrative was smooth. And it's worth sometimes exploring it. What if you do? What if you change this aspect?
Yes. I love editing. I don't love the editing that's the line edit. The commas and all that kind of stuff. but I love rewriting. I love getting feedback. I weigh all the things that my beta readers tell me. And I find thank goodness I find the rewrite process fun because it's such an important part of the writing journey. So
It is.
getting that first draft finished is quite a milestone. Do you know,
Yeah.
so many writers don't ever finish.
Oh, I know. Less than 3% of people, like 80 to 90% of people believe they have a book in them, but fewer than 3% will ever actually write it.
And finish it.
Yeah.
So that's a big, and then going back and editing it
Mhm.
and being really open to what your beta readers are saying to you. I have to hear what they're saying.
Yeah.
And let it settle in me.
Not
and
just
then
the
let me go.
surface level either.
Right.
Like it's
really
not.
look at what they're
Mhm.
saying. My son is a writer as well, and he's one of my best beta readers because he reads almost no genre. He reads only literary novels, except for mine. But he sees subtleties that I miss sometimes. And he never says, you ought to do this, or he just says, here's some questions I have. Here's some things that bothered me, So he's very his feedback is very, very valuable, and he helps me a lot with Reckonings. When on one of my early drafts, he wrote me back and he said, "You promised 3 things in this novel. You promised me as a reader these 3 things, and I'm missing the delivery." I thought, really? So I went back and looked, and then another beta reader said to me, which was I was so grateful. She's a writer herself, also. My son is Robert Osborne, and Karen Struck, and she read the whole book, and then she said, "Karen, I'm so sorry, but I didn't like Roxy." And I said, "Well, why didn't you like her?" And she said, "She's never grateful. She never says thank you for anything." And I thought, oh, but she is grateful. The Roxy I knew, and I went back and I looked, sure enough, the whole darn book, she never said thank you to anybody.
Yeah.
So sometimes we are blind, we don't see things. We don't, because we have it all in our heads. So I love beta readers. And they were so helpful to me. This is my first audiobook. I've been wanting an audiobook from the first one and then the second one. And I spoke to my publisher and I said, "So tell me what to do. How do I get it so you will publish an audiobook?" So he said, "Karen, if you can find a reader that wants to read it and she's willing to do it under the circumstances that I offer, the contract that I offer," he said, "go for it." And so I had so much fun, Brandy, finding, asking people, who does somebody know somebody? And then they all sent me like little little 10-minute audition tapes. And I got all my beta readers on Zoom. And then together, we listened to each little 10-minute person, the first chapter. And then we discussed it, talked all about it. And then
that sounds like fun.
It was like the best party ever. We had wine separately, but it was such a fun party. And then
it's actually a really great idea. I mean, just make it a wine and reading party, and just have a blast that way.
Listening, and it was really fun. And so then we chose Debbie Tinsley, and she said yes to my, so she and my publisher worked out what they needed to work out. And the audiobook and she was so collaborative. I really liked her because, once you turn up your book over, then you don't have a say anymore. It's between she and the publisher. But she contacted me. We had a Zoom meeting. Then she sent me new clips of each of the characters' voices. She said, "Just want to make sure you're happy that this," so she was just lovely. She was absolutely lovely. And I'm very excited.
I imagine that does sound exciting. The first
It's fun.
audiobook. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't ventured into that deep yet, but I do have a friend who does audiobooks, so that's probably on the horizon at some point.
Oh, very good. If you have somebody who does it.
Yeah. So
Yeah. It's not, that too is not easy, changing your voice. Because people would say to me, Karen, I love your voice. Why don't you just read it? And I'd say, because I am not an actor. I can't make myself sound like Spider and then sound like Carl and then sound like, getting those nuances. So,
well, I think I'm pretty good at that. I used to do voices for my son when he was little. He was telling me, I'm not going to read. I'm never going to read. And you can't make me. And of course, as mom, that breaks my heart because I lived my life in books. So it's like, no, I can't have a son growing up who's not going to read. This is just not happening.
this is not happening.
So what I did was, of course, they sent home those silly little readers that they give kids, which are the worst introduction to reading I think you could give a kid because they're boring. I mean, there's no real plot development to them. Or any rate. So what I would do is I would grab books that were way above his age level and reading level, but that I knew had a lot of exciting stuff in them, like Chronicles of Narnia and Dragonlance Chronicles and things like that, that I knew that would pull him in and get him excited to listen. And then I would do character voices with them. So, and every night I would read a chapter and then I would stop. Hard stop. No more than one chapter a night. And eventually he would get the point, but Mom, what's going to happen? And I was like, well, I don't know, honey. We'll have to wait until tomorrow night to find out. And he didn't want to wait until tomorrow night. So he started getting into reading because he didn't want to wait. And so he would read and read, and then he would tell me where he'd stopped. And so we would read together that chapter for that night. And then he would read and read. So yeah, by the time he was done with first grade, he was heavy into reading. He'd already caught up and surpassed his fellow classmates, whereas he started off in reading recovery.
That's a gift. That is an absolute gift. I read to my children every single night until they were like 10 and 9, and they sat me down and they said, Mom, we're so sorry. We know how important this is to you, but we'd rather read to ourselves.
Well, he never really stopped enjoying having me read to him.
Because you're a good reader. You can do voices.
Well, I think part of it though was the attention. It was dedicated time where Mom was paying attention.
Yes.
So I think that was part of it too.
Yeah. And then with our grandson, our middle grandson, he was having trouble reading. And so my husband and I, every week, we would do a Zoom, not a Zoom, it was FaceTime, but whatever. And we'd have the book, we'd have the two cameras this way. And one of us would read and the other one would turn the page. And every time he said, I can't read, we'd say, you can't read yet. You can't read yet. And now he's reading way above grade. Just today's his 11th birthday. And all he wanted for his birthday were books.
Yeah.
So we shipped off a whole bunch of more books. It's such a gift to give children, the gift of and the love of books.
Yes.
To really appreciate and love books.
Well, he had to see, I think, that there was a whole world inside those books that he could only tap into if he learned to read. Yeah. And I think that's what schools don't necessarily do a very good job of introducing kids to reading the right way, because the books that they introduce them to are just, like I said, they're not engaging, they're not exciting, there's not a lot of action going on. It's, see Dick, see Jane, see Spot,
That's changed a lot though, Brandy. I think.
Well, actually,
or maybe it depends on the school system.
It can depend on the school system, but I worked with a lot of the schools. I actually have an associate's in elementary education. Those early readers just weren't that engaging, and they weren't that exciting.
Well, I own so many little kid books. and they're wonderful,
Oh no, children's
dragons
literature is different.
dragons love tacos,
Mhm.
and and all of those amazing stories. And that's how my kids learn to
No,
read.
those children's literature is
Yeah,
different than the early readers that I'm talking about.
yeah.
The children's literature is amazing. Like,
And those are helps kids read.
mhm.
Those stories are wonderful. Um, there's so many. There were so many books. I have such a collection because from the oldest grandson is 15, and the middle is 11, and the baby is 3. So I've got every kind of book in the whole
Yeah,
world
yeah,
for my babies. Yeah.
but yeah. So anyway, but yeah, so that was my experience, and that's how I fixed my son's problem with reading. In fact, by the time he got to 5th grade, his teacher called me in for a parent-teacher conference, and she said, "This goes against everything that I've been taught to do as a teacher, but I need to ask permission to take books away from your son because he won't pay attention in class otherwise." It's like, no, you're right. He's not going to. He's going to read his way through everything if you give him a chance. So I gave her permission because he wasn't doing his other homework and stuff.
Yes, yes.
But and I was the kid under the covers with a flashlight. I knew all about it.
Exactly, exactly. Always reading, every place I went. And I remember when my son was going to 1st grade and my daughter was going to kindergarten, and the school was just right across the way, and there was a crossing guard. So I used to stand on the porch and watch them go off. And I'd see my daughter carrying his lunchbox, her lunchbox, and he's walking, reading. And so I said, "What are you doing? Why are you carrying your brother's things?" And she said, "Oh, mommy, he has to read. He just has to." I said, "Well, he's going to have to figure out a way to do it without you carrying all this stuff." But there she is, and she's a little tiny thing. There she is carrying all this thing so he can walk and read. Reading is wonderful. And interestingly, from all of that reading, so his son is a great reader, and they're both writers.
Mm-hmm.
And my son is a published writer, and then my grandson is also, he's not published, but he's finished 3 novels, and he's only 15 years old, and he's written 3 novels. So it's a beautiful thing.
It
Better
is.
to
Well,
better
I
to
understand.
pass down those kind.
I know. I understand though that you didn't start publishing rather until you were 69. Is that right?
Yes, I've been writing since I was tiny, but I had a big career, and I was always busy, and I was always going to write. So, in college, I wrote a lot of short stories, and I wrote a lot of bad poetry, and and tried all kinds of arts. I painted, but that was because of a boy, and I did sculpting. That was because of a boy. And so but I always was, wanting to create. But then, life, married and children, and travel, and I traveled the world, and there was always so much work to do until Karen and Alex started demanding I pay attention to them. And I literally wrote Getting It Right in the Delta Lounge, on airplanes, and in hotel rooms, because 4 days a week I was on the road. And I was writing on the airplane. I was just always looking for, now they have plugs everywhere, but back then you couldn't find enough plugs. You have to go find where the vacuum cleaner is normally, in the airport. And so, so I didn't really send something out until my mid-60s.
So do you find there are particular challenges being an older writer?
That I think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, Brandy, but I think that there was a time that was true. That you had to be young and photogenic for the book cover, and there was all these, under 30, who's, celebrating writers who are under 30. But, I was in Poets and Writers 5 over 50, and they do that every year. They spotlight writers who are over 50. I was on a panel, of older writers. I don't see a barrier anymore. I don't see that there's, an age problem. I know so many older writers who are doing amazingly well. So I don't know. What do you think there are barriers, age barriers?
I haven't encountered them. We'll put it that way. I think that even if there were, you have so many ways around the barriers these days that didn't
Yes.
exist even 15 years ago. You know, self-publishing is so much more accessible and possible for the average person than it ever was prior
Mhm.
to this. And there are some pros and cons to that.
Yes, there
I
are.
I will say that if you're going to self-publish, you need to treat yourself like a real publisher and do the work.
Mhm.
Get a professional cover done, get professional formatting done, get professional editing done. Do
Copy editing,
yourself a
absolutely.
favor. Don't put garbage out there and expect people to buy it. Get those beta readers,
Yeah.
by hook or
Do
by
like
crook.
you said, do everything
Mhm.
that you would do with a publisher.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, one of the things that a friend of mine has Path to Publishing. In fact, she's kind of the sponsor of my podcast, and she recommends that you actually make a publishing company for your label. So if you're going to
Mhm.
self-publish, be a publisher. Don't don't halfway do it. Do it right.
Yeah, that sounds like good advice. I chose not to go that way, even after getting tons and tons and tons of rejections. And there were moments when
It was
when the
like,
rejections just like weighed me down. But again, my writer's son stepped in and he said, Mom, it's a great book. It's a numbers game. You have to stop like sending out 2 and then weeping. You have to just, just keep going. And so I did decide not to self-publish. I mean, I thought about it, but I decided I would just keep going, just keep trying to find first an agent and then publisher. So now I'm unagented. However you say
yeah,
that. I
I
don't
guess
have an
so.
agent.
Yeah.
But for the first book, I did have an agent.
Well, I think there are merits to going the traditional route. And for those who aren't into publishing, I'll just lay out what I think they are. First of all, you're getting your rejections up front. If you think the agents and the traditional publishers are harsh, just wait until you get yourself in front of readers and let them chew you up. You're preparing yourself for that reality that, readers are going to be readers and they're not going to sugarcoat everything.
Mhm.
Once you get past your inner circle of readers, the readers who don't know you are going to be honest and brutal. And you
Mhm.
need to be prepared for that reality, and to not take it personally, but to learn as much as you can from what they say.
Yes. Learn as much as you can all the time, and and listen with an open
Mm-hmm.
mind and an open. Although I do think I wouldn't write a 1-star review for anybody. If I disliked a book, I don't feel like I owe unknown readers. And the reason is that I find people like such different people find joy in such different things. I was at book a book club. I was an invited author, but I hadn't been published yet. They were reading an early manuscript of my very first book. So
Mm.
it wasn't great. It was rough. But I was thrilled that they were willing to read it and give me feedback. And about 50% of them liked it, and about 50% of them didn't like it. So then I said, well, what did you read right before me? And they had read The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kinslover, which is one of my all-time favorite books. And I said, what did you guys think? About 50% of them liked it. About 50% of them didn't like it. So I feel like if I disliked a book, why would I poison the marketplace. You know, why would I write something mean and put it on Amazon? You know, so anyway, that's how I feel. I feel
Well,
people
I've had 1-star reviews, and I will tell you that I am grateful to the 1-star reviewer. I am.
really.
Yes, I am. Because my first book that got published was actually through a friend who was starting a publishing company, and he read my book and he's like, "Will you let me publish this?" I was like, "Sure." I was just excited. You know, the thought of having a published book was like, "Woo! All
Yeah.
right, I'm on the mend." And he was offering more royalties than I knew that most traditional publishers did, so it seemed like a good deal at the time. I learned a lot of lessons from doing that,
Mhm.
namely, don't. No, check out a publisher before you let them publish your title, because you're going to be stuck with them for a good long while, and you need to be able to trust that they're going to be there for a while, right? And that they're going to deliver what they say they're going to deliver. But at any rate, so I get published. Most of the reviews are 4 and 5 stars. I'm really excited. I'm super thrilled because, I was like, wow, maybe I'm better than I thought I was. Okay, great. And then I get the 1-star reviewer, and it was like, crushing. So my first published book was How to Write an Ebook in 40 Days or Less. Now, I didn't
Yes, I
write
saw that.
anything about I didn't write anything about editing because I didn't know how to edit, really. I didn't write anything about marketing because I don't know anything about marketing. But I did know how to write a book in 40 days or less because I'd done it no less than 6 times at that point in my life. And so it was like, I'm confident I could teach this. Well, let's go. Put the gears on and we step out. I'm like, even if I don't know everything, I know more than the person who knows nothing. So that gives me some qualification there. So I write the book, and my 1-star reviewer comes back and says, "There's nothing new that I couldn't find on the internet in this book." She says, "I guess if you're totally new and haven't been investigating this arena for a while, you might find something useful in it, but otherwise it's not really worth reading." And she was a Vine reviewer, an Amazon Vine reviewer. And I don't know if you know what those are, but those are the people that Amazon specifically picks and prioritizes their reviews. So this was a serious thing. Like, this was a, ouch.
Mm.
And, at first I was like, okay, well, that's not fair because I wrote this for beginners. So how much new could there be? It's not like writing is rocket science. It's not like you're going to reinvent the wheel. But then I stopped and I thought, okay, well, what if some of the other people said that they wished were in the book that wasn't in the book that I could include now because I've got more experience now? So I wrote a couple more chapters. This time I did put a little bit about marketing because I learned a little bit about it. This time I did put a little bit about some other things that I'd learned, so added about 5 more chapters to the book. Put it back out there, but it still bothered me. And I was trying to rack my brain and figure out what she meant by it. Well, around the same time, a friend of mine introduced me to, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but Randy Ingermanson's snowflake method of writing. And he comes from an engineering standpoint. So his method is you take the smallest particle of a story, which is basically your character, your action, and, the consequences. And that's where you start with your story. And you build out from there. Like a snowflake starts with a really small grain and then builds out from that. And so I kind of took a look at his method and started testing it, but he only dealt with fiction. That was where he stopped. And I kind of started realizing, okay, some of his methodology could work for marketing because really marketing is telling a story, right? Where the villain is whatever's stopping the person from getting the result they want. And the hero of the story is the person buying whatever it is you want them to buy. And the result is what your product is going to give them. That's their happy ending. So it's kind of a fairy tale that you're weaving. I joke that most people read Cinderella completely wrong. It is not a romance story. It is a marketing story. If you think about it, Cinderella's life is miserable until what happens? Encounters the fairy godmother. And what does the fairy godmother do? She gives her a time-limited trial of all the things that she needs in order to woo the prince's heart and win him over. So it's all about material goods coming to the rescue and producing the happy ending. It's like, it is definitely a merchant's tale, not a romance novel. But anyway, so I started playing around with it, and I realized that's when I set the goal of, okay, well, maybe what really she's telling me is that there's not enough hand holding, there's not enough step by step in my book for a beginner to be able to follow through. And so then I set out on a quest to find this universal writing system that would work for fiction, nonfiction, and memoir. Whatever you wanted to write, it would work for it. And it took me 5 years, but I did. But I never would have set out on that quest if not for the 1-star reviewer. So I have her to thank for her 1-star review.
All right. That's a great tale.
So, I mean, I think that when you stop and realize that if a person feels strongly enough about your book to leave a 1-star review, you have triggered them in some way. You have triggered some kind of emotional something that caused them to feel the need to take time out of their day to leave a review on your page. So you've angered them or you've upset them or something. And actually, in a way, that's the biggest compliment they could give you. Even if they don't like your book, they've taken that time out of your day to acknowledge your book. Whereas most people, 97% of people aren't going to leave a review.
Don't even write a review. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. Well, you're giving me a different perspective. I've never had a 1-star review, but yet. I'm not saying it's
well,
not
praise
out there
God
somewhere.
that you haven't.
Right.
Yeah, I mean.
But when and if I do, I will look at it. Thank you, Brandy. I will look at it with different. I mean, certainly there are people who've given me 3 stars. You know, I mostly get 4 and 5, but I've had 3-star reviews, and I do look at that carefully and see what it is they didn't like about it, and what their concerns were. I'm very open to feedback. It's just always been, as a manager, I was open to feedback. I always wanted my team to be able to tell me, what I'm not doing right for them, and I was always open to it with my writing, and I was always open, just everything. It's one of the ways you learn, and I believe in failing forward, and it sounds like that's what you did.
Yeah.
It's so important that we fail forward and say, what is the lesson here? What is the lesson here? And I use that as a guiding principle in my life. I do have to say that when I fail forward, I usually bump my head. It's like,
well, it's not that it doesn't hurt. It's not that the failing doesn't sting, right? The 1-star review is always going to sting. The failure is always going to bruise the ego a bit. And, you're going to have to maybe sit there for a little bit and suck the thumb and
what's the lesson here?
Yeah,
what's
exactly. But I think that if you can take a look at it as this person is actually giving you a gift, and even if their 1-star review amounts to your book sucks, well, okay, so their gift is that they took the time to leave you a review. Obviously, they're not that articulate, and maybe this is the best they could manage.
You're very generous.
So you pat that one on the head and you're like, oh, sweetie, thank you for trying. We'll just move on. I appreciate the effort. Thank you for trying. You just go on about your way, bunny, because you clearly need help.
Indeed,
it goes back to lessons on forgiveness, though, is right. Recognizing that a lot of what people do to hurt you has actually nothing to do with you.
Yeah, it's all about them.
It's all about the mess they are and them trying to figure out a way to manage that mess. And
or not.
Right. And they're not managing, right? When they hurt you, it's usually because they're not handling their mess. And because of that, it's spilling out onto everybody else around them. That doesn't mean you have to adopt that mess and make it your own.
Exactly right.
You don't have to absorb like a sponge. You can say, you know what? Nope. I've chosen who I want to be. That's not it. And so you can keep your mess to yourself. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Because I got enough of my own. All right. So is there anything else you wanted to tell our listeners about your book?
Oh, the only thing I would just say is that I also have a podcast, a video podcast called What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing?
Oh, nice.
And yeah, and it's so I post like you, I post every week. I post every Tuesday. So I'm KarenEOsborne.com. And one of the things that I've come from this, like just like meeting you, you meet the coolest people. And as I've met all these different people and read books I might not have read because they're they wouldn't have come across my path. One of the best ways I learned to be a better writer is reading good books. And now through What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I've been exposed to so many incredible authors. I also love that the author community is so supportive, that we help each other, that we support each other. We write reviews for each other. We invite each other onto their podcasts and shows. So that's just been wonderful. And Reckonings is benefiting from all of that. From a year of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? From over a year of meeting amazing authors and being introduced to wonderful books, not only the books they wrote, but the books they've read and are recommending, to the audience. So I would just say that Reckonings is open for pre-order on any place that you buy or borrow your books. And as we just got finished talking about reviews, I hope if you like it, you will take the time to write a review.
Absolutely. I will say that one of the best ways you can thank an author, aside from buying their books, obviously, is to leave that review, because it encourages other people to check out that book and to see what they think. And even if your review isn't what the author hoped it would be, you can still help them with an honest review. So
Thanks, Brandy.
well, thank you for coming on the show. It's been good to have. This is It's Truly Novel, where we explore everything new on the internet. And this has been an interview with Karen E. Osborne. We are so excited to have her here. She's been talking about her book, Reckonings. As she said, you can find her at KarenEOsborne.com. And I will leave a link in the comment section below. So please look for that. Look for links to her books. And if you get a chance, check them out. Thanks again for watching and have a great day.